It is awesome to meet you.
Oh,
thank
you too.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
This is a first for me. Not only is this my first time sitting down with somebody that's an out-of-state, out-of-state entertainer, let alone out-of-state comic. It's my first time doing a podcast with no headphones.
Oh, yeah.
This feels
Raw
interesting.
I just I mean, you can wear them if you want.
Oh no,
Yeah.
it's kind of freeing.
Okay.
I don't know, it's interesting.
I just don't. I mean, I wear headphones, but I feel like I don't know. I don't love.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to be free.
And we were just talking about your touring schedule, all the cities you're going to.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so you were saying it's cool, and I get that. For me, I enjoy going places, but also I see it as a necessary part of the process of studying an hour. That's how I think of it. I think of taping a special as kind of a final exam, and then the tour is the study schedule for the final exam.
Right.
And so basically I got this theater near my home. It's called the South Orange Performing Arts Center. It's a 439 seat theater. They approached me and were like, we would have you on our main stage to record a special. Do you want to do that? And I was like, do you know who I'm not? In
what respect?
Just in the sense of I opened for Maria Bamford on that stage. I opened for Judy Gold on that stage. And it's a, I get it. And it's simultaneously it's the theater near my home and it has a community element for sure. And I've done a lot of stuff with them and I know them. And also it's a big space and, it's shooting a special in a theater is a big deal. No comedian has ever shot a special there.
Nice.
So yeah. So in that sense, that's what I mean.
Well, I would imagine that all that travel does get taxing after a while. And
I guess.
Because you've been doing comedy set for 11 years.
Yeah.
And how far into your career, so we'll get to the beginning, of course, since we're on the subject.
Sure.
How far into it did you find that, in the way that traveling for your special is a necessity?
Yeah.
When it just comes to doing comedy in general, that traveling was okay, now is the time where I need to start branching out. I need to start going out of the state more. How many years did that take for you?
I mean, it's not as simple as okay, now, this is the first in earnest tour that I've ever put together. And the reason that I put it together is because I knew that I, had this date, the theater wanted a date from me, and I was like, okay, so then I put together the schedule. And that's the first time I've ever done it in that way, where it was I have a tour that I'm announcing and it's a thing or whatever. Other times I've traveled, and I've traveled for comedy. I'm not exactly sure when that started happening, but because I'm not going to count the one show in Connecticut that I did a couple years in and then went home the same day or whatever it was. But that happened. I don't know. I think I made $40 or something. When I lived in Los Angeles was when I really started getting serious about comedy, which is some people may think that that's weird because I was in New York before, but I moved to LA for 3 years between 2017 and 2020. And my thought process in moving was if I don't go now, then I'll never have the experience of living in LA, which I think is right because now I'm married in New Jersey and we have a kid and I'm not going anywhere and I don't want to, but also it's whatever. And my further thought process on the move at that time was if I can go away to law school, because I am a former lawyer and law professor. That's my background. But I went away to law school. I went to the University of Chicago for law school, which was away from my house in my parents in New Jersey. And so I was if I can go away to law school for 3 years, then I can go to Los Angeles for 3 years to learn. I don't know, it sounds so silly to be about show business or whatever, but it ended up being actually a really good time. And I did focus a lot on my stand-up. That was where I first really started to know what I was doing, because I think when I was first starting stand-up in New York, and I was also working as a law professor in New York, and I grew up in the area, there it wasn't immersive for me.
I'm proud to announce that the podcast is now officially sponsored by the fine people over at Chop Chili Company. Guys, this is some of the best chili you can get here in the state of New Mexico, and they are online as well as in stores. They can be found at Smith's, Albertsons, Sprouts, John Brooks, and Lowe's Corner Market. They have 3 amazing flavors that you see here, and they also have frozen green chili that you can get online. Go on over to the website, chopchilico.com, and get yourself some amazing chili today. Podcast is now officially sponsored by the amazing people over at High Desert Relief, a premier herbal destination right here in the state of New Mexico. They have extremely well-trained and knowledgeable staff that are more than happy to help you find what you're looking for or try something that you maybe have never thought of. They have 2 locations here in Albuquerque, 1 in Santa Fe. All 3 will be listed right here and in the description of this episode. All 3 offering legendary products at absolutely legendary prices, including this awesome merch that they were so kind enough to gift me here. All of this can be found at all 3 of their locations. Again, big thank you to the guys over at HDR for supporting. Now back to the episode.
Which is to say that I would do like a show once a week, and I wasn't really like friends with other comedians because like everybody I grew up with was right there. And so I never really felt the need to be pushed into the community of stand-up comedians. Whereas when I went to LA, I mean, I have like some cousins who live in LA and whatever, but like for the most part, I was starting anew in terms of like social circle and whatever. And
Right. No, yeah, I'm saying right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I mean, doing comedy on top of being a lawyer and being a law professor.
Well, I was only a law professor at that time.
You're teaching. Like that's quite the schedule.
I guess. I mean, it's not that taxing. I mean, I'm probably gonna like if any law professor hears this to be like, it's very hard. Like don't if you want to really offend an academic, be like, you get the summers off, and it's like, so I don't mean it exactly that way, but like, I mean, I taught a full schedule, but that's like 2, sometimes 3 classes a semester. I mean, there were semesters, like there was one semester that I was teaching a full load at my full-time institution and then was also visiting and teaching a class at another law school. And also I was teaching bar review that semester. Like that was a lot. But for the most part, like you're teaching, whatever, 5 hours a week or 6 hours a week. And like, not that it's nothing, but it's not like being a school teacher. It's not like, being like my child's daycare teacher who's there from 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night or whatever. That's hard. I guess I mean it to be like kind of realistic.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. What law were you teaching?
So I taught property was like my class that like every first year student takes. And then I taught for 9 years. So there was like a lot of different other classes. Like I taught transactional lawyering because that's what I did when I was in practice briefly. And like I taught jurisprudence, like philosophy of law, sexuality in the law. I taught that class name changed a bunch, which was like sexual orientation and gender identity in the law. And then like sort of smaller seminars that were kind of topical on that. And then also I taught First Amendment and I taught, what else? Maybe something else that I'm forgetting. But like property was the class that like that was like my big lecture class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you have a choice in what you were teaching, or was it just like, hey, here's what available? Like when you showed up, like, hey, here's what's available?
Medium. Yeah. It's sort of both because so I was a real estate lawyer in my brief time as a practicing lawyer. And the school that I knew that I'd be going to had a need in property because they have to like fill, the classes that everybody has to take. So it worked out in that way. But like I was pretty scared because I got a C in property as a student and that was on a generous B curve. Like I had to work for that C. And so it was...
I feel that. Oh my God.
But here's the thing is like I love like a rising up from failure type of story and also experience in my life. Not that I like want to fail. However, like I'm a very good parallel parker. Okay. Like very, very good. And the reason that I feel comfortable saying that is because I failed 2, if not 3 driving tests because of parallel parking.
Oh,
so I made it my business to learn how to parallel park.
I don't even think I learned how to parallel park. I had to teach myself with my backup camera like 3
Oh,
years,
really?
like 3
Well, I
years
didn't
ago.
have a backup camera.
Yeah, I was never taught parallel parking in driver's ed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think my dad taught me something like whatever. But like, anyway, so I just mean that like I feel pretty comfortable parallel parking. And the reason for that is that I was so god awful at it. And I think similarly with property, like I mean, I won awards for teaching, you know, and like I taught property. And so it's not, I don't think it's for nothing. And I don't mean it to be self-congratulatory at all. Actually, I just mean it for the purpose of demonstrating that like, you know, I think failing upwards is like a really great method.
Well, I mean, practicing law, teaching law, and then certainly stand-up comedy, there's a lot of room for failure in that. You know what I mean? Like that,
totally.
Especially with stand-up. I mean,
yeah,
there's not a lot of common denominators, especially when it comes to entertainment. But just from all these, whether it's podcasts or speaking to comedians on my own, like the first 4 to 6 years of your stand-up career generally is just learning how to get really comfortable with your own failure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's some of that in law teaching as well. And I'm just like, you know, we see things as we are, right? Not as they are. I was going to say, I think it's Rilke, but it's also Kissing Jessica Stein, which is a lesbian movie that all lesbians hate from the early 90s. But, or I think I have no idea, but maybe the late 90s. But anyway, so it's very good. I love it. And, I think that my lens in that regard is like about, you know, how similar stand-up and being a law professor are. Like, because I see it. Like, it's like, you know, getting your article placed in a top journal isn't that different from like how many views did you get, what club did you get passed at, you know, like where is your special going, how many views does that have, how many followers do you like, it's all so quantifiable and ranking like centric. And I think that like people like who teach law also talk about finding their voice, figuring out, you know, what is it that, because it's like, what is it that I really believe and want to shout out to the world? And I think as comedians, that's what we do too, you know, and it takes a while to mesh, like to kind of fill in the part of the Venn diagram where you're doing that and you're getting laughs.
Right.
Because the laughs are necessary, but they're also red herrings and can be distracting because it's like, if you could get everybody to laugh, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily saying exactly what you want to be saying, right? So, and I think similarly in law teaching, it's like, could you write an article that would like get you a really good placement that would then maybe make a top whatever school start being interested in you and want to hire you? And do you hear that it's so similar to stand up? Probably you could do that, but like, are you getting your stuff by way of saying what you want, saying what you believe, right?
Yeah, and I agree. And I feel like with the rise, like obviously stand-up comedy's been around for a very long time, but with the rise of podcasting kind of adjacent to it, it's added to stand-up in the respect that people want authenticity, and like you don't see a whole lot of character comedians anymore. You know what I mean? Like you don't like I don't think there's ever really going to be like another Andrew Dice Clay. I don't think that there's ever going to be a ventriloquist as big as Jeff Dunham, or like where they're themselves, but they are exaggerated so far past the point of any other comedian. Because I mean, obviously with most comics going on stage, they're performing. They're playing an exaggerated version of themselves. They're playing not necessarily embellished, but like it's performative inherently. But if there's not a base level of, you can tell who I am through my set, you can tell like what, and then if you're doing an hour, so I mean, this is just my personal taste, but my favorite specials tell a story. And maybe like I think like a good example would be Chappelle. Like he is a rare comic in the respect that not just a skill level, but he will set up jokes for minutes on end. Mm-hmm. Long setups, not maybe a few chuckles here and there because he's just got like he's getting into his older age, but he's still kind of got like youthful expressions that he had like in the Chappelle show age. Okay. So those get chuckles here and there, but he'll set up these long stories into one big punch. Yeah. And he ties them all together and he creates a whole through line for that. Mm-hmm. Or like a more recent special, like Shane Gillis' last special. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily telling a story, but by the end of that special, you're getting like where this guy stands on his worldview, how this guy views the world, how this guy viewed the pandemic, that type of stuff. But then, which is why I love so much about stand-up and how moldable it is, you'll get somebody like Mark Norman, where I'd say 80% of his stuff, whether it's his hour specials or like 30 minutes or like 15 minutes you'll find online, it's just zingers. Yeah. Quick ones. Yeah. Set up, punch, tag. Set up, punch, tag.
Yeah, but I think that the other question too, and I don't know, like in terms of the empirical analysis of like whether there are more or fewer now or then, I just don't know. But in terms of like somebody whose style is different, I always think like how close or far are they from that in their regular life? Right. Not that necessarily everybody knows that, but like, I don't know, it just seems like a lot of work to me anyway, to like keep up something other than like just being me. I mean, that's the thing that was attractive to me about this to begin with. And the thing is that I think if I were really into law, like I liked what I did, but I could very clearly see that there were people who were doing my same job who were super into it. And like that, I think that there was for me a few moments that were really telling when I encountered opposite me, somebody in my law school class, somebody who was a partner when I was practicing law in the law firm, and then somebody who was also teaching when I was, who were all respectively like super jazzed about what we were both doing at that moment, and I wasn't. Right. And it was like such an interesting experience to like recognize that in each of those stages of my life in my law career, and I don't think I quite put it all together. Well, I mean, I guess like when I moved from practice to teaching, I did think about how there was this one guy, and I remember I was like coming into work. It was like a really long day. And I was like so tired. And I just remember seeing this guy, Steven, and he was like, "Liz, are you having fun?" And I was just like, I mean, my inner monologue, Noah, was like, I didn't even know fun was an option. Like I thought it might be illegal. Yeah. And he meant it like totally serious. And I think like in that moment I was like, oh, it is allowed and possible to have fun, and he is having fun, and isn't that beautiful? It's a gorgeous thing to be able to have fun while you're doing what you're doing as your job or whatever, your career, your thing that takes up your time. And when I was teaching, it was a similar kind of thing where specifically what it was there was this professor. He was an English-speaking person, right? Like born, I think, in the United States, spoke English. His wife was Russian, I think, and spoke Russian. And I noticed that, number one, he seemed super happy, was always like so into like all of his work. And number two, when I like CV stalked him, when I got back to my office one day, I noticed that around the time he started dating his wife, he started writing law review articles in Russian. And I had heard that he like took up the language, that their shared kids like spoke, and his accent was really good. And, all of that's like impressive. But this was like not about being impressed by the skill. It was about being like affected, I was, by the passion it must take and the kind of like commitment to doing the thing that one does for one's work, to acquire a new language with a new alphabet. Yeah. And be like, not only do I have to learn the language and speak it like in my daily life, but of course I'll write law review articles in that language. And that, for me, as a person who was like doing my 1 to 2 articles a year that was required for me to keep my job and get the research grants. And I was like, I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I wasn't going over and beyond and above what I had to do. Now, if I somehow landed in a place where I had to learn a new language and everybody around me spoke a different language, I 100% would be doing stand-up comedy. I know that for sure. And maybe I wouldn't be good. I'm sure I wouldn't be good right away, but I would figure out a way because it's a very natural, like, expression for me, right? And like what attracted me to it was the honesty. And not like I was lying when I was teaching law, but like all I had to do was just like, it's me to you. I'm just talking to you, you know? And so that's what I mean when I think about it. Like, I don't know Mark Normand well, but I get the sense that talking to him in just casual conversation isn't that different.
Right.
From what he's doing on stage. And my guess is that if you're hanging out with Dave Chappelle, which I've never done, but I'm guessing it's probably sitting around, you know, he's probably smoking like he does on stage, and you're listening to him regale you with long, interesting tales, right? And if there's a way to harness that thing that you do, Danny Jollis, who's a wonderful comedian as well, everybody we've mentioned, great, whatever. I just am always conscious of that because people like say names on podcasts and then it's like, give a compliment. Like, just say they're great. Okay. And so that's why I say that, because it's like so annoying when it's like you hear, so it's like you couldn't have just said wonderful. It's like compliments are free.
Right.
And this is not just about podcasts. It's just like I love compliments and I'm very effusive and fine with it. Like, it's like I'm not a critic. Like, nobody cares if my opinion about and also whatever. They're wonderful. Okay. Who was I talking about?
Jollis.
Yeah, he's really great. And so he said to me that stand-up comedy is your stand-up persona can be your best self at a party. And I think that that's like, I don't know that like, you know, necessarily works in every single test suite or whatever. If you were like really trying to see if it was like a theory that holds up in every single case of every single person. But I think it's a nice like model, you know, because it's like, however you are apt to be in that setting where it's like fun, relaxed, you just get to like, you know, let your hair down, whatever. But maybe like amplified a little bit, right. And like tightened and written and all of that without, of course, losing your best self at a party.
Right. And it's the art of presentation. And what do you think the best version of yourself could be, and how close can you get to that?
Yeah. And remembering that there's an audience and that, you know, it happens to be, my acting teacher, Leslie Kahn, who is also fab, beyond, says monologues are dialogues where it just happens that only one person is speaking. And that's true in an acting situation. And like a lot of times when people are doing monologues in acting, they forget actors. I don't mean it like I'm not one of these people who forgets, but like that you forget that you got to check in with like how the other person is hearing you. In the same way, right now, I'm monologuing. And as I'm monologuing, by the way, I'm building. And so you know that there's going to be another sentence, but I don't know what the next sentence is going to be. And, you know, all of that is like a part of natural conversation. Right. And I think that like, you know, in stand-up too, she's helped me a lot with my stand-up in the sense that like, we were just meeting earlier this week and I was like, here's a set that I don't think is written quite well enough that I wish it to be, but it was great. And then here's a set that was like written exactly front to back as I wanted it to be, but like it just wasn't like amazing, and why. And so we went through like both tapes and, you know, she gave me like acting notes on being yourself in the context of doing stand-up comedy.
Especially for younger comics.
Yeah.
How common is it that you find that they focus almost too much on the joke writing and they focus too much like the structure of a joke,
yeah,
and not the presentation of it? and not the delivery
I don't know.
of it.
I mean, it's hard to answer the question of like, because I'm such an academic. So like when you're like, how much? I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what the data reflect or whatever. Like, I don't know I don't honestly spend a lot of my time like sitting and judging other comedians. I don't think that it brings out my best self, and like it's not that interesting to me. And so I don't know the answer to your question.
Did you find it was an issue for you when you were first starting? And it's interesting. And it's interesting.
Well, no, it was the opposite for me. I like didn't write a single joke until like I don't even know when, like yesterday. But like basically.
But it's interesting you going from a law background to a stand-up background because
so,
you already have.
You're right.
You have the. You have history of presenting yourself in front of an audience. You have to convince the audience that you're right.
Kind of. I was an academic.
So right.
And I was never a trial lawyer.
So let's say so let me rephrase that then.
Yeah.
So let's say you're teaching a class.
Yeah.
You're presenting yourself to the audience. You're presenting the ideas that you want to get across to the audience, and you're convincing them why it's important and why it's applicable. I guess.
I mean, so law teaching specifically is Socratic, and so the way that like I don't know if you've ever seen like 1L the movie, whatever. If you ever see like movies about law school or read books about law school, one of the things that is accurately portrayed is that generally you, as a professor, you don't lecture in the sense that you're not being like, here is the law, here is the rule, here's why it's important. It's like, hey, okay, so we had 3 cases. Mr. Vargas, can you tell me the facts of this and this case? And then you would say it, and then I would continue asking you questions about the facts of the case. And like, I mean, questioning is an art as well. And Socratic questioning specifically is designed to like, pick out. I wish I had like a ready example of like a really good Socratic line of questioning, but I don't. But it's kind of like, so if what you just said was true, then what about this? And let me try and come up with one like from a really simple case. So like when we start property class, pretty much every property law class ever starts with these like very old cases about fox chasing and fox hunting. And it's like, I could ask you a question. Okay, so what are the facts of Pearson against Post? And you'd say, well, there was this like fox and there was Pearson and there was Post, and they were both going out in the 1700s literally to like chase the fox, and who got it, right? And this one says he got it and that one says he got it, and the court, and then I might be like, okay, well, that's not the facts. What is the holding? And I don't even remember who won, but like the guy who like got the fox. And then I might be like, okay, well, let me ask you this. Like, you parked in the lot today, did you not? Yeah, you probably say, because it was a driving school. Okay. Was it busy? Yeah, it's always busy. There's nowhere to fucking park. Okay. Did you find a spot? Yeah. Take you a while? Probably. Did you signal before you because like there might have been another car, whatever. Oh yeah, I did. Okay. Well, if Mr. or Ms. Justice League, I'm just reading your poster, had swooped in to your spot, whose would it be? Would it be her spot or your spot? And of course, what do you call it? Footnoting out that neither of you owns the spot. It's a license agreement, and that's different from, owning a fox. And maybe we shouldn't own foxes anyway, but okay, fine. And so then we could have a debate about, was it the signaling that caused you to have more rights to the spot than Ms. Justice League, or was it the fact that she swooped in, which is like clearly insane and wrong, right? But according to the holding of Pearson against Post, we would think that she got it because she didn't start the chase, but she pounced on the fox. And so, okay, so then we would have a conversation, and I might ask, Thunderdome, right? In that setting, okay, well, what about if it was a whale? Can you catch a whale? How would you catch a whale? Oh, well, turns out the other case that we read for today is, what is it? Genn versus Rich, I think. And that's a case about harpooning whales. And it was also a really old case. I don't know if you know anything about harpooning. I didn't either until I had to teach these cases. Okay. Yeah. I don't know what you think of me, but I don't like whale fish on the weekend. I mean, I guess it's like, it's a thing about blubber and like the oil from whale blubber or something like that can be very valuable. But in any event, whales are big is something that we can all understand.
Keep going, I'm just gonna check cameras and stuff. Yeah.
So because of that, I guess, I don't know if this has changed. I imagine it probably has to some degree, but like there used to be that the way you would shoot at a whale is you would have a harpoon that had like etched into the metal your initials. And then at some point, if you got the whale, it would die. It would fall, rise up to shore and be on the shore, and we'd be like, oh, it's Noah's whale. And we can see because the harpoon, right?
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah. And the thing is that so that teaches us this principle, which was important at the beginning of property law class, which is it depends on the nature of the thing, how we're going to construct a rule about who owns it, right? So parking spots are distinct from foxes, are distinct from whales, are distinct from real property that doesn't move. And, part of the beginning of understanding, what the law is. So anyway, I say all of this to you, not only to, I guess, explain a little bit, but also to demonstrate that it wasn't really that I was ever trying to say I'm right? Right. I'm just inviting possibilities of thought and understanding. And I don't think that that's so different from comedy, or it can be not so different from comedy. I think a trap of comedy can be that you think you have to convince everybody that you're right.
I just got to convince everybody that you're funny.
Maybe. Yeah. Right. Well, or I think you could reframe it as allow them to see that you're funny.
Right.
Well,
and the way that you just broke all of that down, the way your brain works. Uh-huh. When you started doing stand-up, did you find that the actual, when you did start writing and constructing a set and all that you were already at a bit of an advantage because you had been doing that at all?
No, I don't think so.
Really?
I mean, maybe, first of all, my first memory ever is on stage, and it was not a good one. I was in a ballet recital and I cried my eyes out in the middle of the stage.
Yeah.
Because basically I didn't know that there was going to be a recital. I was in ballet class because I got ice cream after ballet because it was on top of the Haagen-Dazs. Had no idea there was going to be a recital. I'm freaking out because I'm I don't know the moves. And then I learned the moves. What we were supposed to do is just hold hands in a circle and walk around. I was that show's going to suck. I'm an artist of integrity. I know I'm 4, but
how old are you?
4, literally. And I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I just stood and cried. And I remember the moment because in my memory, this all happened at Madison Square Garden, which it did not. It was a gym in Cliffside Park, New Jersey, but Madison Square Garden for memory purposes. And the lights were so bright that I was crying so much that I remember the stinging of the lights on my face because of the tears. And at that moment, I was oh, I'm the star of this show. And I had to cry even harder because I'm carrying the production at this point. And so anyway, so I say that because I think, yes, to a degree, I had been up in front of people talking for 7 years before I ever did stand up. But I was also coming from a big negative. I was really stage fright, that moment is my first memory. Right. It's a lot to come back from.
Right.
And, I think I always, I don't know what it is about me, but I think, it's what's your kind of main, my friend, Mike Fenoya, who's another terrific comedian, he talks about your dent, what's the big dent in your life? He has a really great podcast called Dented Cans that I've been on, and he's great. But anyway, now I'm self-conscious that every time I say someone's great, it's they are great. I wouldn't be mentioning them if they weren't great. So anyway, but he talks about your kind of main wound, right? That you're sort of living your life to make right in a way. You know what I mean? It's sort of Quantum Leap-esque now that I say it that way.
Right.
Did you ever watch that show?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
It was a remake, but I watched the Scott Bakula version because I'm old. I'm 44, so I don't mean it like when people say they're old, I'm like, just say how old. I'm 97. So,
well, even if you realize whatever skin routine you're doing,
we'll drop it in the show notes. That's my other fave podcast bit is like that everything we don't get to. It's like it's in the show notes. It's in the show notes because it always reminds me of like in law school when it's like I'll get the outline, you know. Or you don't know because you weren't in law school. I don't know why I said it that way. I just felt comfortable with you knowing everything that I know. So, but there's always an outline for every class, and like they kind of exist on the internet a lot of times. And so that's what I always think of with the show notes.
So I want to ask when you started stand-up, but what I think...
2013.
Well, a good way to, I think, back into, or start up into that too,
Sure.
is like, when did you... So let's say you started out, let's say... Like you mentioned a couple of people that you noticed were in the same field you were and they were just loving it top to bottom and you didn't have that enthusiasm. So let's say that they are operating at 100% capacity for enthusiasm.
Maybe, yeah. And skill probably because they were so enthusiastic and also they actually were. But like, I think that was also like part of the thing that I was noticing is like, it doesn't even seem like work for them. They're like delighted. You know,
so if let's say there is a like a meter for that, right? It's 100%.
Yeah.
How much of that 100% do you feel like you had enthusiasm wise, passion wise when you first started doing law related things, and then when did it start diminishing? When did you notice it start to diminish?
It's a good question, but I don't know that I have like an awesome answer for it because I honestly think that I was never a fit in law. Not to say that I wasn't good at certain pieces of it. Yeah, I was. But like, I think it was just never the thing for me. Like I went to law school because my dad would say like, nobody can take your education away from you. That's what he sounded like. He was from Latvia. Like there's just all time, nobody can take it. I'm like, does anyone want it? You know, like, please have some Adderall with that education. Like, it just like, I don't think it was for me. Yeah. That's the thing. And that's something that I think about in my own parenting now. And my parents were operating from like a place of like their Holocaust survivor kids, you know, like it's a different operating system and I don't blame them. It's just different. And I'm sure I will mess up my own kid in some other profound way. I don't think that I'm profoundly messed up, but like some people might. So anyway, but like for my own kid, I think about, do you have kids? I forgot.
No.
Okay.
No.
So, like my daughter Eloise kicks a lot. She kicked in the womb. She kicks like any live photo, kicking the whole time. She's in daycare. The daycare teachers are like, she kicks a lot. And like, I'm like, okay, so they know, you know what? I don't have a reference point, but I'm like, it seems like a lot. And so one of the things that I want to do is notice what she's bringing to the world. Like, okay, I can see that you kick. And my hope, I mean, that's like an obviously very basic example, right? So now she's like in swimming, right? Because she doesn't even crawl yet. So it's like, what can she do that can maybe like be a nod to us seeing her? Because that's the thing that I want is like, I do value my background in education and the circuitous route by which I landed where I have. I think it's all great, honestly. And I wouldn't have been able to financially support myself had I not started in law, is also relevant, especially for those like early years of doing comedy, et cetera, et cetera. And I would love, because we're always like trying to right the wrongs of a past generation, I hope and guess, that when I look at my daughter, I'm able to like not see, okay, what like job that already exists are you going to be best suited for? Like how can we fit you into that? And instead, what are you really like? What do you really want to do? And if I can foster that talent or hobby or pursuit or thing that makes you happy, I really want to do that, you know?
No, that makes perfect sense. And it makes a ton of sense coming from someone like you that is so passionate about what you're doing. It's like, okay, I've found the thing that I love doing.
Right.
I would love for you to be able to have the opportunity to find the thing a lot younger than I did. Is that a bit of it too? Yeah,
it is. And I guess I just like, I don't know. I don't want to be like, oh my God, and this is why I'm such a good parent. Like I'm fine at best, but like, I just, you know, think about it and I try to be conscious of it. And I think you're right because it just wasn't the way And I don't think that there was like anything super wrong with the fact that it wasn't the way that my parents approached parenting me. It just was.
I'm starting to think there is no one way to parent people and parent kids.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I don't know if there is. I mean, I'm not a parent, obviously, but like a lot of my friends starting to have kids, and and I just look around at like, you know, me and my friends are obviously getting well into the age where it's like, oh, we're really thinking about how we were raised, how could we raise potential kids, and that type of stuff. It's like, well, that way was a lot different the way that I worked, and that didn't work out too great, and this didn't work out too great.
Yeah.
Is there even a middle ground? Like, how does you know what I mean? So I don't think there is a one way to do it.
Yeah, I think that's.
But I think one of the very few infallible methods is do it with the best intentions. At least do your best. Do it with the best intentions.
Yeah.
And then be aware of the consequences of your intentions. I think that's a good part two to that is be aware of because the road to hell is paved with good intentions anyway. Yeah. But if you're doing what you're doing and you believe it's the right thing, be aware of the consequences of what's happening. Yeah. Especially with fucking parenting. Holy shit.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine the responsibility of having a kid. I couldn't imagine that, right?
Well, and it's also like, you know, as we're having this conversation, I'm not unaware that like we started this long tangent that got us right to this moment because you were asking me about my travel schedule. When I think about my travel schedule, my first thought is, oh, I'm a terrible parent because I'm here. I'm in New Mexico. My daughter's in New Jersey. Like, yeah, she's being taken care of. My wife is home. My wife is amazing. Thankfully, one of us has to be. But like, you know, I don't feel great about, like, I get why I'm here, right? And I understand that, like, okay, well, I'm trying to, like, make it so that I know the hour that I want to tape, and that can help us have food to eat and you to have a future, hopefully, you know, or mommy to have an even bigger ego. But either way,
someone's getting served. You're going to get served dinner, or I get served an ego.
Compliments, yeah. But either way, like, so I just mean to say, and obviously I'm joking, but, you know, I can tell myself that as like a reason, but also like, I don't know. I mean, it's just reality that I feel torn a lot of the time.
Right. And I think, well, I mean, I feel like out of all the options of how to recognize that's got to be one of the healthiest. Because otherwise, it's like, well.
Very healthy.
Or it's like, well, you just completely forget about family. I feel like a lot of people, maybe they don't start doing it in the beginning, but as a coping mechanism for the loneliness of being on the road or just being homesick in general. And then maybe that guilt does start to creep in a little bit where it's like, man, I missed another birthday. I missed another soccer game. I missed a recital. Fuck. And it's like, well, while I'm on the road, I know what the minimum boxes I got to check are to keep my family happy, so I'm just going to check those boxes, but otherwise I'm kind of just going to tune out. And I feel like that's not uncommon for a lot of entertainers to get into, whether they're on the road doing comedy or music, or they're off shooting films or TV shows. I feel like that'd be is where my brain goes to. That could be an easy coping mechanism just to stay away. Not stay away, but like just to kind of tune that part of your brain out.
Yeah, and I'm sure that my wife, if she was listening to this, would be like, oh, you do that too. Because I'm sure I do. And, you know, and not like, I don't know, it's just like sometimes when like today, my day today is I'm here with you. This is like, you know, friendship, but also it's work. Like you invited me here to do our work. Beforehand, I was meeting with a friend. She is a friend, but also like we know each other through acting. Right. And we were having a meeting, you know, and I don't mean it like it's more than it is, but it's like it is those things, and also it's friendship.
Well, you can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah, right, totally. And then I'll do 2 shows, and then I'll go straight to the airport because I have a red eye tonight. So that's a pretty intense schedule. And I say this just because, like, sometimes on a day like that, not that my wife was sitting home. I mean, my wife was like at work herself and figuring out picking up our daughter and the babysitter, you know, like she had a lot going on as well, arguably more than I did. But regardless, I think in those moments, sometimes it can feel like you're a little less connected because it's like, well, when am I going to talk to her? I'm not going to call her right now. We're talking, right? I'm not going to necessarily, I mean, I took a phone call when she called me when I was with my friend because my friend knows her. Oh, hey, we're going to say hi on FaceTime briefly, but it's brief because we're, you know, meeting. Right? We haven't seen each other. I mean, I don't live in Albuquerque and my friend does.
Right.
Right? So it's like, I think that, you know, my wife always tells me before I leave town, she's like, get in touch 20% more than you think you have to. That's what she says. And I don't know that she like means it as some kind of like big insight, but actually now that I'm saying it, I'm like, that's like actually a pretty amazing way to think about it.
That's some pretty healthy advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is.
Because she's like, even if it's late, my phone will be on silent. Don't worry. I want to know that you're done with the show and you got back to the hotel. I want to know when you wake up. I want to know, oh, hey, I'm going to podcast. I'm going to turn my phone on silent, which I did before we started. You know, and she's like, you don't have to, like, if you're thinking, shouldn't I text? Just text. And then I'm always fine to receive your texts. Yeah. And so
you're
that
not taking
I think,
away by doing that.
Correct. Yeah. And so that I think is a really, I mean, my wife is very smart, and that's a way that she's able, I think, to really get through to me.
Well, and having the wrong partner doing the type of work you do
terrible
can make or break you.
Yes.
And I think about that sometimes, about how many great entertainers didn't even get the shot.
Yeah.
Because they were overly concerned with may well be a healthy relationship, but their partner just isn't the type of person that fits well with someone who's going to be on the road or someone who's going to be entertaining.
Yeah.
Even if you are let's say you're a featured act in a big comedy club or a whatever where you live. So you're home, but late nights, 3 to 4 nights out of the week, and then random things pop up like, hey, I got a opportunity to go do a set here, so I'm gonna go do that, or I got an opportunity to go do a big podcast, so I'm gonna go do that here, or whatever it is. And then with that level of success, at some point a touring thing's gonna come, the availability to go on the road's gonna come up anyway. So, and why would you say no to that?
Yeah.
So it could be a very healthy relationship, just the partner's not built for that. And I also wonder how much of it could be they didn't sign up for it at the beginning, but the person they're with got into it during the relationship, and then you know what I mean?
Yeah. So by the time we met, I was doing like terribly in terms of how things were going. Like, I thought I was fine, but like comparatively, I was making like $1, if that. I was using savings from when I used to work and getting out of debt. I mean, you know, like, I wasn't sober quite yet. Not that I think that sobriety has to be the case for every person, but I think, like, for me, I think it was necessary.
Well, some people needs to.
Yeah. Well, it's just like I have such, I think it's a good quality of me, but it's like a dangerous one, which is the ability to be sucked in to like a vortex of one kind or another. And it could be positive, it could be negative. And I think that having the availability of drugs or alcohol in that equation is just really risky if I have that constitution at all. And so anyway, so like I made the decision years ago at this point to quit, and I wasn't like, you know, I wasn't like in a gutter and whatever, you know, like, but I was just like, I don't think that this is helping.
Well, I was going to say, was it a matter of, okay, I don't have a problem right now, but I know I want to do stand up.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't necessarily helping me do stand up, and there are so many roadmaps that I can already look at of stand up comedians were infinitely more successful than me right now.
Yeah.
And this $20 bottle of Jack still fucked them up. So it's like I see where this could go.
Sure.
So just cut the cord now.
Yeah.
And make it a habit when you're like a couple years into it, make it a habit rather than get 10, 15, 20 years deep, and then it's like, oh no, I think alcohol's a problem now.
Yeah. I did have that awareness like as a possibility, but I don't know that I really felt like specifically that was going to happen. I think I'm really motivated by peeling away all of the layers of myself and like, you know, touching the sun, getting to some kind of like truth level. And I think that the reason that drugs, alcohol too, but drugs were more enticing for me, but like any of it where altered consciousness was like part of what happened. I think the reason that it was dangerous for me was because it kind of felt like maybe I was touching the sun and finding truth and all that, except that then it was drug dependent to get there. And my therapist who I've had the same therapist for 17 years, which I told that to my brother. My brother's like, that's the disease. Like, that's not anything to brag about. She's stealing from you. I'm like, no. And also, like, I have a kid now, and everybody, when you have a kid, tells you, like, don't screw up your kids or else they'll have to go to therapy, which I think is so funny because I'm like, I literally love therapy. Like, therapy's my favorite hour of the entire week. You know, therapy's like a party and the theme is me. And so I'm just like, what's wrong with therapy? You know, it's like, don't screw up your kids, they'll go to law school. But
or they'll start a podcast, man. Fuck.
Yeah, or insert literally any job. Become a therapist. But anyway, so...
Well, for some people, it works.
Yeah, yeah.
You know
and
I mean?
I think, yeah, I mean, I was way worse before my therapist. I mean, she's the best, truly the best. But also, at some point when I was like toying with the idea of getting sober, you know, she made known to me, and I guess like actually now that I'm saying this, it's sort of similar to like the Socratic method and the way of like teaching law. And also my acting teacher teaches that way too, and I'm noticing those connections right now. But in any event, it's just like reflecting back to me, like things that I've already said. And she's like, well, the things that you seem to be most concerned with are like trusting yourself. That's really the thing, is like the confidence that arises from trusting yourself. And what'll happen, I'm noticing, because you come in every Tuesday at 11:10 in the morning, where you've been coming for, you know, at that point, probably like 11 years or whatever it was, to tell me about how bad you feel about having done XYZ drug, you know, mushrooms or weed or, you know, I mean, whatever it was that had a utility, and I learned some lessons. But then I would go back to the drug, and it's like, am I relearning a lesson? She's like, you have a memory. You can like remember the lesson.
Right.
So like maybe just consider that if you were sober, you could just kind of be even and get further in whatever your pursuits are, because you don't like dip back into this vortex that it seems to be for you.
Right.
And trust yourself less because you might have had whatever insights, but then afterwards you're like, oh, but that was the drug.
Right. And intrinsically, you don't want to do anything that's taking away from your goals in life or just your well-being in general. But
yeah,
because drugs and alcohol are the weird one, because with sobriety, there, in my opinion, my uneducated opinion, there isn't a net negative with getting sober. You know what I mean? Like having a couple drinks or just drinking in general, it does nothing for you.
Right.
Right. There is no like holistic, real health benefits to booze. Like, and the people that say, well, I drink red wine for the antioxidants.
Sure.
Eat a grape,
you
bitch.
Don't.
Eat a fucking grape.
Yeah.
Eat a blueberry. Like, come on. If you really care about your antioxidants.
Blueberries are really good.
Yeah. If you care about your antioxidants, go eat some fruit.
Well, now I'm remembering in your questionnaire, which I don't know, did I answer it good?
Which one?
Your questionnaire that you...
Oh, yes. In general, yes. Oh, yes.
No, well, I'm just saying, because like I really, after I did it, and I have a thing with like admiring my own work, which is like disgusting. Like, it's like, if you want me to see an email, put it in my sent mail folder, is a joke that I sometimes do on stage, because like that's the one that I check reliably, because I like never send an email without going back to be like, isn't this a masterpiece? But so I will admit to that. But like first of all, great questionnaire.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Second of all, the reason I brought it up right now is that I was remembering that in one of the questions I answered, I think it was like, what do you want to talk about? And I was like, giving up sugar. That's what I said. And it's like, we've come to it so naturally, because that's like my addiction that I have left, or if we want to call it. I don't mean addiction with like, I don't know, sometimes people get like all whatever about like calling it an addiction or not. But that's like my maybe final frontier.
Well, it's tough.
Well,
it's hard to get away from. Sugar's fucking everywhere.
Do you know Alan Carr?
No.
Okay. So he's dead. So you wouldn't be able to know him. But he wrote this book called The Easy Way to Quit Smoking or Stop Smoking. And it's been translated into like 1 million languages. And people like celebrities like talk about it on Stern and stuff like that. There's like, I think Ellen literally like quit smoking by reading this guy's book.
I feel
and
like
maybe like Nikki Glazer.
I was going to say, Nikki
yeah.
Glazer brought that up on Rogan, I think.
Yeah, like it's a thing that people like talk about on podcasts and stuff. And I don't remember exactly when I became aware of it, but like in 2017, I, previously a cigarette cigarette smoker, not ever like super heavy, but I picked it up in law school and then I just like couldn't quite let it go entirely. Like I would be like having a drink and like having one cigarette or like
Socially.
whatever. And I was like, this has got to go. Like this is not going to get better. And like my dad smoked and had like a million. I mean, he died ultimately of heart failure, but like he had heart disease for 40 years. He had his first heart attack at 33. I'm like, it's not like a good thing. Like he lived till 73, but like painfully.
Well, I would imagine also he grew up in a culture where maybe towards the tail end of like, hey, smoking, or maybe because I'd imagine what I'm trying to say here is his in his life, he still existed when it was like cool to smoke.
Totally.
It's
and
what everyone did.
In Latvia. So he's like a Russian guy, basically.
Yeah.
So like, totally.
That's how Russians stay warm. It's tobacco. It's tobacco
really
and
funny.
vodka.
That's
That's how
really,
they
really
fucking
funny.
stay warm.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, he was Latvian, not Russian, which is like something that I feel like if he were here, he'd be like, say that. So I'm just gonna say it. But anyway, so it's true also. But a smoker, it didn't work out well.
Yeah.
I knew, I was like, this has got to go. And I read Alan Carr's book, have been quit since reading his book in 2017. And he has other books about other addictions. One of which I did read maybe a year and a half ago, I want to say, or like even close to 2 years ago, that's called Good Sugar, Bad Sugar. And so the reason I say all of this is that you said it's hard, and his whole thing is you're wrong. It's easy. Because that's his whole like kind of brainwashy thing is like, and it's amazing. Like if you read these books, you're like, oh my God, he's so right. And it's wild. But anyway, I can't I can tell you everything I know about the book, but like it's not going to work like the book.
Well, here's what I find interesting about sugars in the American diet is if you're uneducated to what actually has sugar, you'll ingest so much more sugar in your life as if you do a couple Google searches.
Totally.
I mean, like bread.
Right.
Not random, but your average run of the mill, like commercial brand bread has so much fucking sugar in it.
Yeah. Totally.
All of it has a shit ton of sugar, and you don't really know that unless you know to look at ingredients. Because again, the average person, you look at bread and you're like, it's what? It's like flour, some fucking dough, maybe some yeast. I don't know. They threw it in a oven and they brought it to Costco. Like it's not that crazy, but like well, they don't exactly have a bunch of people just making. It's all mechanized and it's all automated, and it's how can we get to this outcome the quickest, the cheapest, and maximize the margins, and apply that to almost every food in the American diet. And there is just a shit ton of sugar in there because they want you to keep coming back, buying it.
Well, that's what the book
good.
says.
Right.
And it's like similar to his book on smoking or not smoking, which is like basically that the industry is trying to brainwash you to believe that you actually want this when you never did. And it's slightly different for sugar, but like it's interesting. And I mean, I'm not going to say that like there's a lot of quackery that may be going on with this guy.
Well, that's
right?
like to say that they're trying to convince you that you want it. Well, yeah, no shit. It's called marketing.
Right, exactly. But it's like, anyway, so he goes through a lot of it in the book and like whatever. And I read Good Sugar, Bad Sugar in June of 2022. And I was off of sugar through November of 2022. I mean, it was like my skin's never looked better. I dropped weight immediately. Like it was like amazing. But then the day that I like went back to sugar, I recorded my hour, okay, which was like I have an album. I'm very proud of it. It is a gut-wrenching album because it's about stillbirth, because my wife and I experienced a stillbirth, and it was like taped on the 1-year anniversary of the stillbirth. And like, it's funny. I promise you it's funny, but it's also like very grief-centric. So I taped that. I was starting a job for 3 months, and we got to move out of our house and into my mom's house because we were doing renovations. Privilege for sure. All of it was like good, but it was just like a lot at once. And I remember I think it was an entire pizza after I recorded my album.
That's a fuck ton of sugar.
It is. And then it was kind of like lost from there. And so anyway, he has this other book called The Easy Way to Quit Emotional Eating, which is what I'm in the middle of currently because I'm like, okay, well, the sugar piece I ended up being like fine with. Are you sponsored by them? Nice.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I didn't want to cut out not fulfill my contractual agreements.
For sure. Wait, can I just ask, because I mean, being in Albuquerque, like green and I guess red also, Chili's.
It's a cult.
Yeah.
It is a cult.
They're really good.
Born and raised here. It's a good cult to be a part of.
Yeah.
But the shit tastes amazing.
Yeah, it does. And that those are good as well.
Oh yeah, you guys are the fucking best. And it's funny because when I got approached by them, I had never heard of their brand.
Okay.
And super nice guy. The guy who runs, his name's Zane, and he was like, yeah, we had a meeting.
Yeah.
And he goes, look, I don't want you to. He very smart guy, and he said it before I could. He was like, I don't want you to sponsor anything you don't believe in.
Yeah.
I'll send you a couple jars. If you like it, great. If you don't, fair enough. It's not for everybody. And I was like, this is some of the best fucking chili I've ever had.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Especially for store-bought. Because people are super against store-bought. Like, like the real New Mexicans, like, yeah, we'll buy the chili from, like, the ranches, or we'll go to, like, the people roasting them, and we'll make the chili ourselves.
Right.
And there is so much merit to that. I don't have the time, the skill, or the need. So I'm like, what is the best, like, store-bought?
I would be buying them for sure.
And that's the best store-bought that I've had.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's a cult. But anyway, so emotional eating, that is...
Yeah, so that's kind of like where I'm at now is like, I do believe... So in emotional, the easy way to quit emotional eating, there's a line where he says, you know, you might get a lot out of my book, Good Sugar, Bad Sugar, which I know I would because I did, after you've mastered the issue of emotional eating. And so, because in that moment, that was 100% emotional eating. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm always like searching for the self-help book that's going to like unlock some superpower in me. But I think it might be it.
Yeah.
So anyway.
It's interesting. Well, there's a local comic here. His name's Cardo Mad, and he has a line that every time he does it, like, I don't even know how you would make it better or how whatever, but he has a line where, because he talks about being addicted to eating cheeseburgers and stuff like that, and he said, it sucks to be addicted to the thing that you need to survive.
Yes.
And every time he says that, I'm like, I wish that got more laughs.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make that get more laughs, but I love that line because people will see extremely, like, and I don't condone obviously being extremely overweight ever, but people will see that and they just write it off as like, oh, just put it down. Yeah. It's like, well, yeah, okay. Well, you drink 7 cups of coffee a day.
Sure.
Just stop.
Right.
It's not like anybody with an addiction ever sets out to just, you know what? I've never had a cheeseburger before, but I'm going to have 7 today. It's like, no, they had 1 and it was fucking dope and it tastes amazing. And then maybe 6 months later, the boyfriend, girlfriend broke up with them. Like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm not in the mood to make food tonight. I'm just going to make a cheeseburger.
Right.
Next night, it's, man, that was fucking easy, but how's Italian sounding?
Yeah, yeah.
How's pizza sounding the next night?
Yeah.
How's Mexican sounding the next? And it just becomes this like, and you could you could take out food and you could transplant booze, weed, crazy stuff like heroin and meth. Like that's how easy that stuff, that's how it all starts.
Yeah.
Because and it's not surprising that you found like the noticeable changes when you did, you know, stop sugar. Was there a point where it was like, hey, with emotional eating, it was like, hey, I'm doing this well past my sustenance need. Like
totally. I also like.
What was that for you?
I don't remember specifically because it was also after I had already read and like taken in the sugar book. So every single time I was eating anything different from what I had eaten for like June 2022 through November 2022, I was aware, as I continue to be, that it's like not the thing. Like, I'm like, this isn't, I know that I'm brainwashed to believe that this is, and I'm using the language from the book, but like, I do believe it. Like, he brainwashes you to believe that you've been brainwashed before. That's his strategy.
I'm going to gaslight you into believing you've been gaslit.
Correct. But at the end, you're kind of like, well, I mean, it's like, what do you call it in chess? Like where it's a stalemate, you know, because it's like, I don't know if that's the right thing, but it's
I know
like,
what you're saying. It's like, no, if he makes a move, you're going to make a move. If you make a move, they're going to make a move.
Right.
You can't outskill yourself.
Right. So it's just like, okay, yeah, like I think you're right, you know, because like, it's also like, okay, so if I think you're right, then you can give me quitting smoking in my life, like the equivalent of that, which was like amazing, you know, like I mean, I wasn't any kind of super heavy smoker, but I was the kind of smoker that was like continuously aware that at any moment I could be
3 packs a day.
I don't think I ever was that, to be
No,
honest.
no,
but
like you could see like where it could get bad.
Yes, but even more than that, it was more that like I knew that I could be convinced to have a cigarette like right now. You know? And that was the part that annoyed me. It wasn't like the amount of it. And I think similarly with sugar stuff, like sugar, it's like you can see your weight, and not just about seeing, but you can feel your weight, and it's like more and less comfortable, or it's like, you know, yeah, just like easier or harder to move around. And that can be subtle, but it is there. I'd be lying to myself if I didn't say it was there.
Well, and then if any major like life medical things happen, that just becomes so much more challenging.
And,
you know
and
what
of
I mean?
course, yeah, and I'm in a position, I mean, knock on wood, and luckily where like there doesn't seem to be kind of a discernible thing that like happened or would happen or whatever. It's more theoretical at this point, but I'd like to have it stay there, you know? So that's like the motivation. And also like with having a kid, like, you know, now I have a baby who doesn't yet crawl, but soon, please God, and hopefully I will have a baby who walks and runs around, and, you know, it's going to be a thing like keeping up with her, especially with all of her kicking, which I imagine will translate into like whatever she's doing when she can walk.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense. And so so you brought up something very interesting with your album, with your album.
Sorry, Noah.
So how we talked a little bit earlier about having the right partner for the, I mean, that applies to any job you're doing, right? But especially with entertainment on the road, having the right partner for that, having the right partner that you feel free to speak about what you want to speak about on stage without criticism.
Totally. Yeah.
And obviously having a stillbirth is incredibly like, that's life-changing. Like that's a, you know, that's not, you know, it's not like, oh yeah, Monday we went out to see a show, Tuesday we went to go swimming, Wednesday we had a stillbirth, and then Thursday we shot a TV show. Like, no, this is like all breaks, like something like a real thing. As you're writing that material, as you're testing it out, trying it out, are you like having conversations with your wife about, hey, this is where the joke is going, this is what I want to write about? How are those beginning talks? Were there talks about it? Like,
I mean, so it started right away, pretty much. I mean, not literally like at the moment of the stillbirth, but we were in the hospital for a while. We were in the hospital for like 48 hours because first it was medical because my wife's blood pressure was really high, so she had to be on a magnesium drip, which is like a 24-hour drip, like an IV that is, I guess it's really painful. Like not, I don't think it's painful. It's like really nauseating. I would say it's terrible.
Gotta be, if it's a constant drip, if it's through an IV and it's meant to lower your blood pressure.
Yeah, it's bad.
That's got to be debilitating as shit.
I think it was like really hard. And so she had to be there for that. And then she had to be there for 24 hours after that to monitor.
Right.
So we were there for a while. And, you know, like I mean, we both went through it, but like she went through it in a different way than I did. And so we were, you know, just there with each other and talking and whatever. And what was true at the time, that time in my life, was that I was planning to record an album about expecting to be a parent. And so I thought that I was recording an album very close to the time that we ended up having the stillbirth. So I had to like, you know, cancel that date and like put it on hold, the album and stuff. And so I guess I say that because it's true, but also because it caused some of the conversations that she and I were having to be about material and like, what do we do now? Because I'm a comedian. And so I was like, how am I ever going to be funny again?
That is one of my favorite Christopher Titus lines. He has an album from a while back called Love is Evil.
Okay.
And he finds out the scenarios. He finds out through emails. He gets into his wife's email. He's in some other city, in some other state across the country. And he gets into his wife's emails. And he finds out that his wife has been cheating on him for the last 6 months. And she's planning on getting divorced and taking the kids.
Wow.
And so he's talking talking about that, and he goes, and he says, yeah, in my inner brain, or my inner monologue goes, all right, see how funny you are now, motherfucker.
Yeah.
And he found that out, I think the premise was like 15 minutes before a big theater show.
Wow.
So yeah, that's real shit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyway, so I had that thought of like, am I ever going to be funny? And then a couple things here and there in the hospital started happening that just were funny. And I talk about them on the album, but at some point, like, there was like 2 or 3 or 4 of them. I'm like, I got to write this down. And so I had this file entitled Way Too Soon. And that was what began, you know, the process of like writing this other hour about, you know, something totally different.
Do you feel like it was a good healing exercise, healing I hate to say like coping mechanism.
No, it's both.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, was it a good good way to channel that? Because just, again, couldn't fucking imagine it. But more often than not, most of the time, especially as closer to the event, it's got to feel overwhelming. Yeah. So being able to take that and kind of just put it into something.
Yes. Yes. All of that.
You feel like that was productive for you?
I do. Yeah. And then, you know, like I still have situations now where I'm like, okay, if I have an opportunity to tell a joke like in a taped set, do I want to do the stillbirth joke? Like, kind of, because
it's unique to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, you know, it is, yeah. I mean, it's just like, it's a thing that happened. And like, I did mine it for, laughs, but like not laughs at the expense of our daughter or like laughs at the expense of us or anything. It was just like, what's happening?
Yeah.
You know? And it's just like, it was like really, I mean, the main one is like that after somebody has a stillbirth, or at least where we were, the hospital has like a protocol where they're like, you should have like a physical experience with the baby. And I think the thinking is like, they don't want you to regret it later. And from our perspective, we were like, we'll do literally anything you want. Like, whatever you say, we're going to do. And so they're like, okay, like talk to the baby, read to the baby, sing to the baby. I'm like, okay, have a weekend at Bernie's with our baby is what you're saying.
Oh my fucking God.
And so we did, like, we were
that's
like
fucking horrible. I love that. That is,
but that's like also what it was.
Yeah. So I gotta ask, like, what are they?
So the other thing is that they also tell you that you should take pictures as a family.
What the fuck?
Exactly. Wait, and that was, yeah.
I mean, I gotta ask, are they, what? Are they saying you should literally have the body?
Yeah.
And I've never heard of that.
It's a thing. And so, and I think it's like...
Can I ask a stupid question?
Yeah.
Is that sanitary?
Yeah, because like they keep the body warm, and it's like, it's not like you're like throwing it around.
Well, right.
It's like, you know, okay, we're going to have like a visit with your child. And like, yeah, so they keep the baby in like a warmer in your room, and you're not there for that long. Right.
No,
so,
I'm not imagining it's like a fucking week long.
Right.
You know.
Right.
But and I understand the sentiment.
Yeah. It's basically like, we don't want years later for you to be like, what did she look like? What was she like? What did she feel like? And I think that that's like totally reasonable. I do think it's a little bit of like perhaps an overcorrection.
Yeah, it sounds a bit macabre.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but it was also like, it was the thing. So the other thing is they were like, and you should take pictures as a family. And like, we at the hospital are going to like facilitate this. And we were like, okay, whatever you say. And I thought it was like so horrifying. And I was like, is this wrong? Like maybe we should like say something and not do this, until we took the pictures. I see the pictures and I'm like, I look fantastic in these photos. And it was not like, that was true. Like, I'm like, we need to frame this and put it over the fireplace. Like, this is my new headshot. Like, it was so, but honestly, and honestly on that point, and of course, like, it comes from a true moment. Like, in no moment of any of that joke or any of like our experience am I not like, our daughter, Leo Pearl of blessed memory, I wish she was alive. I wish that she was able to be our other daughter, Eloise's older sister. Like, of course.
Yeah.
And this happened to us, and this also happened to us right after. And I'm not saying it's like wrong or I know a better way. I'm just like, I was having thoughts and feelings because I was an alive human being in this moment.
Well, you talked.
And one other thing is that when I looked at the pictures, I'm like, oh my God, I really am like a gross human being. That even in a picture of my dead child, my unconscious first thought is, how do I look? And like, that's just like a reality.
That's a real statement.
Yeah.
Because, well, like you talk to anybody who's been through, most people have been through a traumatic experience of varying degrees. One of the most common reactions is humor, because that is the brain protecting itself. So then you have this happen to a comedian. Mm-hmm. Of course, their brain is going to go immediately to, all right, this is horrific.
Yeah.
I feel like there's like a timer.
Yeah.
And it starts ticking towards the moment where that first like, that's kind of ridiculous. Okay, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And it just starts like that, because you start doing something like stand up for so long where if you want to get good at it, even just okay, but if you want to get good or proficient or excellent at it, it has to kind of just coat your brain. That way of thinking where it's like, okay, what I have to be able to find not only just things that I encounter in my day-to-day life or things I see on TV, but just things that I experience. I'm probably better off than not to find an angle into that to where that could be material. Because I was having this conversation with another local comedian. I'm sure you'll see him at Dry Heat tonight, Jake Otero.
Oh, yeah. Yes, he's great.
Yeah, we were having a conversation about short jokes.
Yeah.
And how some people do short jokes. Short jokes are not unique anymore. And I was like, well, no. Maybe if you watch Brad Williams on repeat, that won't be original anymore because to your brain, you've seen it so many times. But if you work at it hard enough, your short jokes are going to be unique because it's your perspective on it. Nobody else has your perspective on that material.
Sure. And I think that that's correct. And something that Maria Bamford, obviously like a goddess among us, has said that I thought was really interesting is like whenever she is like wondering like, oh, have I stepped into territory that's like well trodden, whether it's like about mental health or whatever, like a lot of people may have jokes like that. She's like, I just write the shit out of my material such that it could only be mine. Right. And then if you listen to like her stuff, it's like the level of the snowflake and the intricacy of the detail, and it's so well done, and it's so obviously, expertly written and performed, and she's amazing. But it's like, there's no but. It's like, it's so her, but the reason it's so her is because like she made it that way.
And she has the experience where she's able to attack it from angles that will naturally flow into her voice, and then it's her physical voice going out performing that, and then with what you and your wife had experienced, I mean, again, it just makes perfect sense because again, you're not, of course, and that's that's another thing I love so much about comedy is encountering that experience, experiencing a stillbirth. Yeah. A lot of people, unfortunately, have gone through that. Yeah. But how many comedians have gone through that? Okay. Sure. How many good comedians have gone through that? Okay, even smaller.
And I'm always like, I'm not saying I'm good.
But the fact that you were able to tackle that, and then even if you wanted to, like someone like Anthony Jeselnik, so go through that lens, even if you wanted to get like borderline insultive about it towards any aspect, any angle of that situation, right? You is what I like about comedy is like you can get away with that because it's your experience. Whereas if you were like, let's say I went up there and started making jokes where people have stillbirths, it's like, all right, this dude is probably an asshole. Yeah, and the best way I've heard it put, we did a live podcast on Wednesday with Buck D and Six, his co-hosts on their podcast, and we were talking about a lynching joke that he has. And he was like, why can't you do that joke? As an example, like, why couldn't I do that, right? It's like, well, and the framework around it was that comedians either don't do jokes or maybe cannot do jokes because they're too far from it or they're too close to it.
Sure.
They're so close to it that they just emotionally can't detach and they can't form the comedic breakdown around it, or they are so far from it that unless they are just tippy top of the podium when it comes to joke writing and delivery and self-awareness, and the weird alchemy that makes a joke or that makes a premise or that makes a bit, they are, unless they're at the tippy top of that, they are too far away from whatever that instance is to where there's no way they don't come off like a prick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I say all of that because, right, of course, like you just said a little bit earlier, of course, you wish that didn't happen and she was lying, she was here. But if this is the route this had to go down, something good can come out of it one way or another. Is it the same amount of good as a human life? Of course not. Of course not. However, and again, if you can make it to something, extract some positive out of it. I'm sure it was a grueling experience, but extracting positive out of it, and then again, making it so intrinsically and holistically yours. Yeah. Using and then it helps you with the healing process. I'm sure it helped out your wife as well. Like,
and she also did her own work and stuff. But
is she a comedian as well?
No,
or is
she's a rabbi.
Oh, she's okay. I did not actually. Okay, if you would have given me like, hey, you got 5 guesses, I don't know if I would have picked rabbi.
I know. But I mean, we both are in the business of taking our life experience and making it into, the thing that we give others by way of speaking and performing.
I gotta ask.
Yeah.
Did you write any jokes about the tunnels?
I didn't write any jokes about the tunnels, but I do have a joke about the conflict, kind of.
Okay. Yeah. I'm stepping away from it now. It's just like, it's just one of those hot flashes in the news. And it's like it's the closer you are to the event, the funnier, more well-known it is. Right? I was writing stuff about that too. I just thought it was fucking hilarious. Totally. I don't know why. It's just become the secret tunnels under New York.
Yeah. You could play a rabbi. You have throw like a Strymel and I don't know what their whole get up is called, but
I have no idea either. I'm about as educated as.
But you look like you could be among like the Williamsburg Jews.
Get the curly fucking.
The payas and
Get the big hat too.
Yeah, right.
God, how. It's just that image of the guy crawling out of the hole. I saw that and I was like, there is something here. That is fucking, they run in the Ninja Turtles down. Like, that's fucking hilarious. Anyways, so that's awesome to hear that you were able to successfully bring that horrific situation to light. Yeah. And then coming out of that, because I would imagine as you were writing stuff up to coming up to that event, you hadn't written about anything that was as close to you as, drastic, traumatic. No. So coming out of that, do you feel like it changed your writing process at all? Elevated your writing process? Not changed it in the way of I do things differently, but I now have a new way of looking at a premise. I now have a new way. I mean, here's
one thing it did is, so my dad died within the past 3 years, and when he died, it was still in the middle of COVID. So I was doing Zoom shows or whatever. And I was like, I have some jokes about his death, but I don't want to bum out this Zoom. And so I would kind of shy away from doing stuff about his death. But let me tell you, there is nothing like having a stillbirth that makes your dead dad jokes suddenly your lighter material. And so I think one of the ways that it affected me is that I was more comfortable with stuff that I thought was too heavy before. Yeah. And I'm like,
so it raised the threshold.
Yeah. I mean, that said, I don't know. It's not like, I think most lessons worth learning in life are ones that you have to continuously remind yourself of, rather than now I know that. It's not like knowing multiplication tables or whatever it is. But I think that for me, that is getting in the mindset of no, I wanna tell them everything.
It sounds like you became more comfortable with it. And you became more open, I guess.
But I just mean that, like, even though I did for the purpose of that recording, it's not like I don't have to go through that process, like, over and over again sometimes.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So going into now in May.
Yeah.
Shooting the theater.
Yeah.
First time shooting in that theater, first comedian in that theater.
True.
And you mentioned in the beginning that you are using this tour to shape up that hour-long material.
Yeah.
What are you taking into consideration as, like, okay, this is how I'm going to get the most out of this tour. This is how I'm going to get the most out of these cities. Are you caring about demographics? Are you caring about this city leans a little left, this city leans a little right? These guys are more pot smokers. These guys are more drinkers.
Sure.
Like, what type of demographics do you give a fuck about that type of stuff?
I don't know that, like, that plays an explicit role for me. I mean, it ends up being true and a consideration because, like, you know, whether or not I'm doing this for the purpose of the hour, first of all, the special taping is what I mean by that, is like, it's still far enough away that it's still a little bit of an intellectual exercise to imagine it happening, right?
Have you accepted that it's happening? Like, you're like, fuck yeah, I'm shooting a special?
Barely. I mean, I know it's happening. I can't even remember if it's in my calendar. I do that sometimes with, like, the literal thing. Well, I'm not, is the thing. And so I put everything in, but then it's like, oh, the one thing that you're literally thinking about all the time is just not there.
Like the magnum opus
Correct.
of, like, what it means to be a comic right now. And yes, we are entering the age of, like, a 25-minute, 30, 40-minute special, but the hour-long special.
And I'm not saying it has to be an hour, because, like, I get bored easy. And so, and also, like, I only get one show. I don't have a cap on, like, they're not going to kick me out or anything like that. So it may end up being an hour, but I'm not promising that it's definitely going to be an hour. I don't really care. And I don't know, the whole conversation around that, like, it has to be an hour. Like, I'm just like, I don't care for the athleticism around stand-up, like that whole conversation around it.
Hell, like, a lot of other comics don't either. So.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so, and also, I'm not, if I put out a short special and somebody's conclusion is like, well, you couldn't do a long special, fine. Okay, maybe you're right. I don't know. But anyway, so I don't mean
the viewer experience should be number one. Like, you know what I mean? The viewer experience and the way that it goes down is, I mean, there are a lot of pitfalls in sticking to numbers and saying, like, I need to hit 60 minutes minimum, when in reality, the proverbial you, right? If someone says, hey, I need to hit 60 minutes at a minimum, and they end up doing the 60 minutes, but in reality, when you're watching it back, it's like, hey, this is a fine 60 minutes, but there's a sharp 45 in there. Yeah. There's a sharp 40 in there.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you going to get the more value out of?
Yeah. I don't really care about like the time of it, but, you know, whatever it is. And, but I think, to your question, I probably think about that stuff a little bit more just when I'm in a city, right? So, like, I mean, I started the tour in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and then in Oxford, Pennsylvania, middle of almost nowhere to, like, where are we? And it was snowing. Like, it was like, I drove with my friend Nick Viagas, who's an amazing comedian. But we were driving from Pottstown to Oxford, Pennsylvania in a snowstorm. And the road was such that, like, we saw the snowplow and we're like, we should let that snowplow ahead of us so we have even a chance of getting there. Like,
how long of a drive was that?
Well, it ended up being like 2.5 hours or something. But I think it's like supposed to be like an hour or whatever. Anyway, it was really snowing. But so, like, those shows ended up going great, even though I'm probably one of the only gay people they've ever met, and I'm not, you know, I'm liberal, and, like, I'm sure that they disagree with me on, like, 1,000 things, and we made it work. I mean, you know, like, they were both, like, actually some of my favorite shows, and so I don't know if I think about it so much from the perspective of, like, I want to try every one of these jokes and see if they work everywhere. Like, you know, put this on a video while someone's being waterboarded and see if they laugh or, you know, whatever. Because I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't work. Like, I might not be for everyone. And I feel like that, along with the, like, it has to be 60 minutes, is this kind of, I don't know. It's almost like this referee-dom of stand-up comedy. Like it's like, it's not the thing, it's like CrossFit judges determining whether, it's an RX movement or something.
Well, it is good to, in just different
standards
mediums.
are good,
and
but
mediums,
like,
I guess. Not even
right.
standards, but just like, this is like the thing that a lot of comics do shoot for. And to know that, and it's like it's like a giant pro wrestling belt. You know what I mean? It's like, like I did the thing. Like I crossed over the threshold. I have an hour of material. Now, granted, you should be saying that if it's a good hour. Yeah. But if provided that it's a solid hour, you can now say, like, I reached that landmark of being a stand-up. Where it's like, and obviously some people will hold other things in higher regards than others. People won't give a fuck about a special. They just want to make it to this one. I want to do a feature set at this comedy club, or like I would love to be able to open or feature from this comic. Like that's my thing. Fuck a special. I'm worried about this. Right. So there's and varying degrees of
good. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, but
Yeah, it's cool to have through my mind's eye. It's cool to have like storied traditions, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Fair. Yeah.
And I think that, and that's not to knock these like 30, 45 minute ones that are coming out, because YouTube lends itself to that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? YouTube lends itself. And then it's also kind of, I remember I was watching, I think it was Sam Talent's recent hour that he did. Yet. I think it's such a ridiculous title. It's The Toad's Morale.
Okay.
Yeah. Phenomenal special, but what I was interesting about it from the get-go is it's not exactly an hour. I don't think it's like 53 minutes, 54 minutes and some change. So it's like, oh, so this is tight. Like this is like edited to a T. Like you don't set out to do 53 minutes and 27 seconds of stand-up comedy. You know what I mean? So to know this was really like honed in to be the thing. So and again, like streaming and YouTube just lends itself to that. So okay, so going into the taping, is there anything about your act, like whether it's the actual joke structure, or it's the delivery, the presentation, inflections of your voice? Is there anything you're conscious like, okay, I know I gotta really dial these things in?
All of it. I mean, it's all of it. It's like, because I think it's showcasing what I hope is, a cumulative effort where I will have written and performed this material in roughly this order, however many times, such that by the time it's getting to you on tape, it is the culmination of this tour and this time in my life. And also the years before when I was doing stand-up and getting better and, and getting worse before I got better and, whatever, all of it. Yeah.
Fuck yeah. Well, I'm very, very excited for you. I want to be conscious of your time.
Oh, sure.
So this is going to come out in about, I'd say like a week and a half or so.
Cool.
'Cause I've just been like going like that. What are the upcoming dates that you've got coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot, and they're all on my website, which is
cool. Where can people find you?
Yeah, dearlizglazer.com is my website, and then I'm at Liz Glazer on like socials and whatever, and I welcome writing via the website or, whatever, like social media. And then I'm really just promoting the special. So May 16th, 2024 at SoPac. And that's not to say that the other dates along the way won't be great, but you'll see on the website when I'm coming to perhaps your city. And I hope you come when I do. But yeah.
Well, thank you for coming and doing this.
Oh, thanks, Noah. I loved it.
This was a lot of fun.
It really was. Thank you.
I know the show's going to go well tonight.
Oh, thanks.
And like we were talking a little beforehand, I saw Isabel Madley, who's a great local comic.
Yeah.
I want to say she's from Santa Fe.
Okay.
There's a lot of shit here in Albuquerque, but from Santa Fe, she's awesome.
Great.
And Dry Heat's just dope anyway. And
I love
big
Dry
congrats
Heat.
to Dry Heat for moving into a new space.
Yay,
so
Sarah and Kelly.
That was my last question for you, actually.
Yeah.
Is your show tonight at their like known
the
location?
Old,
okay.
Yeah. So
I know they're they're not moving to like April, right? Something like that.
That's right. April 1st.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I love Sarah and Kelly so much, and I'm so happy to be back. I love Dry Heat. Thanks so much, Noah, for having me.
Thank you for doing this. And if you're ever back in town, I'd love to do it again.
Same.
This is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.